Welcome. You're listening to How I Did That, a storytelling podcast. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, my name is Jordan Ropat, and I own Plant Joy, a vegan donut shop in Windsor, Ontario.
Cool, Jordan. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I was honored when you reached out. And of course we know each other through Plant Joy. And I'm always so happy to see your smiling face when you come in. And then, I always see your Instagram stories afterwards, posting the most beautiful, aesthetically pleasing photos of the donuts. So it is my pleasure to be here. I'm so thankful.
Advertising. Honestly, every time, I remember when you made the matcha Frankenstein donut and when you made the jelly, it wasn't Punchki Day, but you made the stuffed jelly donuts with the white icing sugar coating. Were those supposed to be Punchkis?
So it's so funny actually, because technically, to my knowledge, a Punchki is different than a jelly donut, I think, because jelly donuts at any donut shop is a jelly donut, but a Punchki is supposed to be a very specific kind of a very fattening dessert that you're supposed to eat right before Lent. So basically, the religious tradition is that you use up all of the sweet and fattening ingredients in your cupboard, and then you use lard, traditionally, which of course is not in my vegan donuts, but butter, milk, eggs, sugar, all of these and you make these super fattening donuts, and those are Punchkis. For me, though, we don't have a specific separate recipe for Punchkis versus our regular donuts. It's all the same donut recipe. It's just that our regular donuts have a hole in them and the Punchkis are filled. So yeah, long story short, even the jelly donuts that we made not on Punchki Day are still technically our Punchkis. In Windsor, I think it depends on the place that you go to for Punchki Day. There are some more traditional bakeries that still probably use that traditional style recipe. But now in Windsor, there are places that do gluten-free. There are places that do other things like us, we do vegan. And so really it's just become a day to eat jelly donuts. I don't think that a lot of places still adhere to the specific kind of old style recipes.
Okay. Yeah, because I was talking about the matcha Frankenstein and the jelly donut, the Punchki, and then it was a cranberry pear fritter. I know you did it was either orange creamsicle or it was key lime pie.
Yeah, we haven't done key lime pie yet, but that's been on my list for a while. We did margarita. We did orange. That's the lime one. We did so margarita was the lime, and we did orange creamsicle, and we did pina colada. We had that tropical week. It was June and January. That was really fun.
Okay, because orange creamsicle has a really distinct flavor. So to get that on a donut would be really nice. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and then tell us how you got started with Plant Joy, why you went vegan, all that good stuff.
Okay, so it's funny thinking about my career trajectory, because when I was a kid, my plan was always to be a doctor. So that's kind of where my aspirations were when I was younger. I think as early as maybe grade 5 or 6, I knew I wanted to be a specialist kind of doctor, which now that I think about it sounds kind of silly, because I said I wanted to be a specialist, but I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to specialize in. I think I just liked the idea of being a professional, being a doctor, having that specialty that I spent 5 or 6 years perfecting after medical school. I was really interested in psychiatry. I really liked the idea of connecting with people and talking to them, and that does tie in a lot to what I do now, in obviously much different ways. But connecting with customers and with my community and with other business owners. so I went to school for neuroscience. So I did my undergrad in behavior, cognition, and neuroscience at U Windsor. Then I did my master's in London in neuroscience as well. And it wasn't until I was probably about, I want to say 23, maybe 22 or 23, that I really started thinking seriously about not continuing with school. And I think there were just a lot of factors that played into that, but for the most part at that point, after like being in very demanding and very like just very heavy coursework for like 7 years, and studying for the MCAT, summers in between, I was just pretty burnt out. And so after my master's, I took a break and I just got like a retail job selling barbecues. I was I was okay at it. It's funny now, like looking back, I'm like, why of all jobs to get, like, why would I be a vegan trying to sell barbecues? Right. But I just needed a break from all of the things that were taking up all of my time and energy, and most of that was school. It was just like you go to class and then you come home and you have reading to do, and there's not a lot of I think I just didn't set good boundaries around like when to work and when not to, so I ended up just spending so much of my time on school. So anyways, long story short, I took a break from academia, from school, and I thought, okay, maybe after this, maybe I will apply to med school, maybe I'll do something else. And in that time period, probably a couple months after, actually by that point, I think it was about a year after I graduated from my master's, I started PlantJoy. And it's interesting now looking at the trajectory too of my business, because a lot of people will say like, oh, you just blew up like overnight, like it was like there was no PlantJoy and then there was PlantJoy and everyone loves it and you're selling out. And I think my experience with starting a food business, like that wasn't my first time. And at the time of starting my business, I didn't really have an awareness, I think, of all the other experiences that I had that led up to that. So at the time, it just kind of felt like, oh, I started this business, I started making donuts, and oh my gosh, we're so busy, and boom, like it just took off. But in my undergrad, I used to hold a lot of bake sales to raise money for charity, and that was like one of the primary ways that I like would unwind, like after classes and exams and worrying about getting into med school. That was like my joy, because I would not only be able to like make treats and decorate them, and I really put a lot of effort into like I bought special piping tips for cupcakes, and I would decorate cookies for Valentine's Day. And it was not only like the cooking aspect of it, but it was also like the enjoying other people's company in relation to like a larger cause. So, when we were raising money for charities, we would, all get together. We would usually have multiple events, aside from just like one bake sale. And so, yeah, that was like my way to kind of like allow myself to do something that I enjoyed that also had a higher purpose. So yeah, I started making cupcakes for bake sales, and I really enjoyed baking. And then I think 3 years before I started PlantJoy, I started a vegan cupcake company that was like basically not for profit. Like I would just make cupcakes and like I would donate all the proceeds. And at the time, like the refugee crisis was really at the forefront of the news, so I raised money for that. And then a year after that, I started making vegan cream eggs and peanut butter cups for Easter, because those were things that I missed as a vegan. So then, and that it did work out pretty well. It was fairly popular, but at the time, like I was living at home and was just trying to make chocolate in my parents' kitchen.
Was this Cadbury cream eggs?
Yes.
What? And it was in Windsor?
Yep.
I've been in Windsor since I grew up, like since I was a child, and I never knew that this existed.
That's so funny. But you know what? It wasn't like well advertised. It was like just my friends and family mostly. But it did, like the word got out a little bit further than just my circle. And I got a lot of orders, and like I didn't have the space to fulfill it. Like I just physically didn't have the kitchen space.
Molds?
Yeah. So you have to like buy the egg molds and pour the chocolate into it, and then put the egg molds in the freezer or the fridge to harden. But it just takes so much time.
Right.
So if you're doing it on a large scale, like you need like 500 molds or however many chocolates you want to make, and put them all in the freezer at the same time, take them all out, and then like probably a good percentage of those are going to break and crack when you so I realized that like that wasn't my path at the time. Like I tried it for Easter, but then silly me, a year later I tried it again because I was like, I'm just gonna give this a shot. I think like hindsight's 2020, and or maybe that's not the right phrase. I think I had rose-colored glasses about the experience I had making chocolate, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it again for this Easter. And that was when Plant Joy started. So that was 2018.
Did you start it thinking that it was going to be chocolates, that you're giving this another try?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I started out thinking it was just going to be chocolates, and and then I made sugar cookies for a very brief time, like a week or two, and then I had a conversation with my dad that I remember. It wasn't like when I started making donuts, I didn't have a business plan. I didn't think like, oh, this is going to be the next big thing, like donuts. I just realized that Windsor doesn't really have a donut shop. Windsor has bakeries that make donuts, but Windsor doesn't have a specialty donut shop. And nobody was making vegan donuts. And so I realized this was something that I wanted, and I figured other people probably want this too. And so that part took me a lot of trial and error, like a few weeks of just like, I would test out, like I would veganize like non-vegan donut recipes, and I would try out a couple different things, and I would tweak them, and I added this and I added that, and I fixed the recipe probably like 8 or 9 times until I was really happy with it, like with the recipe that I came up with. And I just, the rest is history, I guess. It was really popular, but it definitely was something that, it's something I'm really proud of, because I put a lot of time and effort into coming up with this recipe and this technique of production as well, that I think is really unique. And I do get a lot of feedback from people, especially non-vegans, saying like, this is the best donut I've ever had. So that always tells me that I'm on the right track, especially when non-vegans can try a vegan dessert and they don't automatically have that like, oh, I can tell this is vegan.
Right. Okay. I wanted to ask something before I forgot, because like you mentioned the chocolates earlier and then we moved on, but don't the chocolate eggs like melt when you try to give them to customers? Because like vegan chocolates melt so quickly, like coconut oil, or cocoa butter if you use it for regular chocolates.
Yeah. So when I first did it back in, I think it was 2017, I was delivering them all around the city, and it was in April, like it was Easter time. So it wasn't super hot outside, but there was one day I was delivering that was like so hot. And yes, they melt very quickly. I had to like cart them around in a cooler and like try to make sure that they didn't get mushy on the way to people's houses. But yes, making chocolate was an interesting challenge, and it is not something that I do now for a variety of reasons. It just didn't click with me. I was like, you know what, I'll leave this to the chocolate experts, but that's not me.
Did you ever have like a big failure where you're trying to deliver the chocolates and like they get to the customer and you're like, oh my God?
I had many big failures. I definitely had a couple smushed chocolate experiences, and but you know, I think for the most part, like I try to be as open and as understanding when it comes to customer service as possible. And so I think, you know, every time I've made a mistake, whether it was, you know, there was a time a couple years ago where when I had just started Plant Joy and I had so much on my plate too much on my plate. And it was a number of like things going wrong in like this very short period of time. Like I had an initial rental kitchen that was working out pretty well, but then I was leasing from them and they were leasing from somebody else, so I was subleasing, and it turned out that in their contract they weren't allowed to sublease. So, but I didn't know that. So they were renting it to me, but they weren't technically allowed to rent out the kitchen that they were renting. And the weekend, it was like the Friday before Father's Day weekend. They were like, I'm sorry, like you can't use the kitchen this weekend. So I had so many orders planned for Saturday and Sunday. Like so many orders, and I had only been making donuts for 2 months. And I had a pop-up event on the Saturday. That was for one of my good friends' going away parties, when she was raising money to go on like a trip basically. And so I was like, you know, I want to support my friend. I'm gonna, you know, make some donuts and sell them at her going away party and donate some of the money to help her go on her trip. And again, I had been making donuts for 2 months. So it's very important when you're first starting out to, you know, have good relationships with the customers that you meet, because those are the relationships that you're going to be building upon. And those are the people that you would hope are going to be returning customers. So anyway, so I had to move all of my equipment. I had to move probably like 200 pounds of like ingredients, plus all my mixing equipment, Friday night. And luckily Littlefoot Foods was gracious enough to let me rent their kitchen that weekend. So I basically moved all of my stuff to a brand new kitchen. I think I got to Littlefoot Foods probably around 8 or 9 p.m. Friday night, and I was working until like 2 p.m. Saturday, like through the night, through the day. And so I had to call like the customers for Saturday. I had to call them all and say that their Father's Day orders were going to be late. And I was like an hour, I think, late to my friend's like going away party, and I was stressed out. Like that was a very, very, very stressful experience. But you know, luckily my friend was really understanding. The people that were hosting her like little going away get together were very understanding, especially once they heard like the whole rest of the story, and they were like, whoa, you had to move all of your stuff like last night, and then you worked throughout the night, like you didn't sleep, you haven't slept yet. And then all the customers were really understanding too. And I think with the customers that were late, I ended up offering, I think, some extra donuts that I like delivered on a separate day, like personally to their house. I was like, here's some extra donuts in this new flavor that you've never had before. I hope you like them. And I can count like on my hand, like the customers that were late, like all of them like are still customers today, and super supportive, like, but I think there was like 5 of them. And so, I mean, it wasn't like, now looking back, it wasn't like a huge disaster, right?
Did you have other people, like, was your family in the kitchen helping you, or like other employees?
On that day, no. And I actually didn't have any employees until I opened the storefront. So I was a pop-up shop for a year before I have the storefront on Wyandotte. And yeah, I didn't have any staff until I had the storefront. I did have a couple people that would help me out, like when I really needed it. Of course, my family has always been supportive, and so they would help me with events or help me when I needed help in the kitchen, but they both have full-time jobs as well. So I had a couple friends who like I could call on, like if there was like a certain instance where like I really needed somebody, and like they would just come and help for a couple hours. And
yeah, so that was one of my first really stressful mistakes, but luckily, I learned something from it. And one of the things I learned was to not spread myself too thin. Maybe when you're just starting out, you're really eager, you want to be part of this event, and you want to do stuff for a special holiday. Maybe just pick one thing. Mm-hmm. And obviously easier said than done, but when you're super ambitious and you're just starting out, you want to thank everyone and be the best that you can possibly be. Sometimes it leads to you overestimating how much you're actually able to do comfortably.
Right.
So that was definitely one of my first lessons. It wasn't the last time that I had to learn that lesson. And I think maybe it's finally sunk in at this point, 2 years, 2 years and a bit into business. But yeah, and then another lesson I learned was the importance of really good customer service. Like if you make a mistake, do your best to own up to it and provide kind of a solution to the problem. And it's something that I still take to heart to this day. If I make a mistake, whether it's somebody orders 6 donuts and somehow they only own up to it, have an extra, obviously replace the donut you didn't give them, so they get 6, or even give them a couple extra next time they come in, or provide a gift card, or just best to provide what you want from a customer service representative. So yeah.
Okay, so I remember last year, the very first time I came to I found out that Windsor had a vegan donut shop, I went absolutely nuts. And then after that, I ended up coming. And I remember I got the cinnamon, the strawberry glaze, and the old-fashioned and the vanilla. And they're still some of my favorite flavors. I'm just surprised that in 8 or 9 tries, you were able to get them that good. How long did those 8 or 9 tries take you? A couple of weeks, months?
Well, at the time, that's all I spent my effort and energy on was perfecting this donut recipe. So, I just worked really hard on it, and I think it probably took me, probably about a month, maybe a little less than a month. But oh, wow. Yeah, it definitely took me a lot of trial and error. And like I said too, it's not just the recipe of what ingredients are in it, but it's also the technique of rolling it out and cutting the donuts just right. And it's something that I still continue to work on and perfect. And something that a lot of people don't know about donuts and anything, any baked good that's made with yeast, is that yeast is essentially a living organism. It's obviously not the same as an animal, right? But yeast does react to the weather, so sometimes I have to adjust the recipe a little bit in the winter versus the summer, because it's affected by the heat outside or the cold outside and the humidity and lots of different things. So it's something that I still continue to work on to make sure that it's the best that it can be.
I did not know that. So how do you have to adjust the recipe to account for seasonal changes?
So it really depends on what you're trying to counteract, but there's just a variety of things I can do, whether it's changing the liquid content, whether it's changing how much flour I use, whether it's tweaking a couple ingredients here or there. It's just it can be a finicky style of baked good, that's for sure.
Okay, over quarantine, I did have just like a whole donut fiasco for a couple months. I was like, because Plant Joy was closed too. That was the reason. Because I really, really wanted donuts. And
That's
yeah.
so funny. You're not alone. I know a couple other people messaged me that they were trying out donut recipes because they missed us, that we were, you know, when we were closed.
The fact that your recipe changes with temperature, it's kind of like I guess frustrating. I would think as someone who's running a business.
It can be, but for the most part, it's not a big hassle. It's not going to affect the dough to the extent that that somebody might really be able to tell. But I can tell the difference, and I can tell the difference in the consistency as well. So it's something that's important to me, even if it's a small change that nobody will truly be able to notice. It's something that I'm able to notice, and consistency is really important to me in making sure that everyone gets high quality products every single time they come in. So yeah, that's something that I'm just more aware of as the owner and the creator.
Oh yeah. So when I was trying out all those donut recipes, I realized how hard it is to actually try to roll out donut dough and how hard it was to roll out. Do you have a donut machine or something? Because they're all so symmetrical, all your donuts.
You know what? We actually don't have a donut machine, and we roll them out by hand and we cut them out by hand. And it depends on how they're cut. Some of them do end up like a little bit, not symmetrical. They might be oval shaped. They might have a little dip in the side where they were cut. But yes, they all are cut by hand, not by a machine.
That's crazy. And you did all of that before you had any employees?
Yes. It was a wild ride. Wow. I look back and I can say, like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend to somebody that they take on as much as I was doing all by themselves, but at the same time, I didn't have any staff, and all of the money that I was making from pop-ups and from sales like that were just going straight back into buying more ingredients. Mm-hmm. So at the time, it's not even really that I had the ability to pay for an employee. It was just me, and I had to make do with what I had. So yeah, it was long hours. I was working typically it was 18, sometimes 24-hour work shifts. Wow. Sometimes I would work the whole day and the whole night to prepare for an event, that weekend, or to make donuts for a wedding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so wow. It's been a journey for sure.
When you mentioned pop-ups, when did Plant Joy's actual storefront open?
So we started doing pop-ups in April of 2018, and our storefront opened May of 2019, so basically a year.
Were those pop-ups like Littlefoot Foods or other places would let you bring your donuts in and you could just sell them there, or how did that work?
Yeah, exactly. So Littlefoot basically allowed me to sell their donuts, Littlefoot allowed me to sell my donuts there, and I wouldn't have to be there to sell them, which was really helpful because that meant I could make donuts for sale at Littlefoot, and I could also have them be sold somewhere else, or I could go to a pop-up on the same day, which is really nice. So Littlefoot had my small display case at the front, and they would sell my donuts on a couple days during the week. I think it was Tuesday, Thursday. And then I would also sell them at Bullseye Pizza in South Windsor. And then I was also attending pop-ups, either sometimes it was on the same days as they were at Littlefoot and Bullseye, and sometimes they were on the weekends.
Oh, wow. So it was those two places that were the main areas you were selling your donuts.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So usually I would attend the pop-ups myself on whether it was like Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and I would sell the donuts myself there. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Bullseye and Littlefoot would sell the donuts on my behalf. So that was really nice because I was able to just make them, and then I could do whatever else I needed to do that day, whether it was like, working on the paperwork for my business, or sometimes it was just sleeping because there wasn't a lot of that in the first year of starting my business.
That's awesome. And was it like, did you know the owners of these places beforehand, or how did you reach out to them?
So Littlefoot, it was a no-brainer because I was using their kitchen.
Right.
And I had met the owner of Littlefoot, I think it was at the downtown Windsor Farmers Market. And I knew that he was renting out his kitchen. Rob and Rachel Myers, they both own Littlefoot Foods, but I met Rob first. So Rob and Rachel had been renting out their kitchen to a couple other small businesses, and I heard about that, and I thought this is a great opportunity. They have quite a large kitchen, so it can fit a couple people that are renting it at the same time, and I started renting from them. And they also have a storefront where they sell their pierogies, and they sell some other goods that are also made by local small businesses. So selling
awesome.
at Littlefoot was a no-brainer since I was already making the donuts there. So the donuts didn't even have to be transported. They could just stay in the building and be sold there. And then Bullseye, I don't actually remember how I met Aaron. I think I just went in there to buy vegan poutine when I heard that he had it. And he's just a really funny guy, and he became such a great friend and supporter of my business. And so that was the next step as well, because it was nice to have my donuts in South Windsor, available in a different part of town. And he also had a growing vegan menu, and so it was nice for him to be able to offer dessert as well. So that was in my next step there.
And then when you were starting out, like, how many flavors did you have when you opened your storefront?
When I opened my storefront, I think I had total flavors I ever made, I probably had 8.
Okay.
And the first day that I opened my storefront, I think I had 5 flavors available that day.
Did you have an Instagram page before you had the storefront?
Yes, so I had an Instagram page ever since I started it in 2018. That was basically the first start of my business, was creating that page and sort of announcing to people, hello everyone, here's what we do, this is my business. And again, at the time it was just chocolate in April of 2018 or late March. And then beginning of April, after Easter, is when I started making donuts.
How did it gain traction? Because for me, I noticed the Facebook page one day when I was Googling vegan eats, it popped up. Through Facebook, Instagram, and word of mouth, were those the main alleys, I guess, through which you were advertising? Or how did it suddenly become so popular and you started selling out?
Yeah, well, so basically just Facebook and Instagram and word of mouth. That's kind of how it happened, because when I was just starting, Facebook and Instagram were kind of the way that I first connected with some people, and I followed some other vegan businesses and, some other local small businesses that I connected to. And then, of course, when you're providing something that nobody else is doing, it's very exciting, So anytime something new and vegan opens up in our city that nobody else was doing before, everyone finds out about it super quickly, right? So at the time, at the very beginning of my business, it was mostly just super excited vegans that I connected to. That I've been vegan for 5 years and I haven't had a donut in that long, and I really miss them. Or some vegetarians who are trying to go vegan. So that's kind of who I first connected to. But then, of course, vegans are friends with non-vegans or family members, and so other people find out about it, and then, somebody tries it, and they go, oh my gosh, this is the best donut I've ever had, and I'm not even vegan. I get that all the time. So it kind of it grew in a very grassroots way, but because this is a product that nobody else was making. It grew quickly because people were really excited about it.
That's awesome. How has it been like when you started? Because I know you've been featured in like the newspaper, and I think you won some awards as well, right?
Yeah.
Like after the word got out, and then did people start approaching you for like interviews, or you got the paper? And I guess like main milestones maybe that you could say.
Yeah. So January 2019. So less than a year after we started, less than a year after I started my business, in January of 2019, I entered into a competition that was basically a vegan like baking competition.
Was this in Windsor?
Yes, so that was in Windsor.
What's the name of this competition?
It was basically just called the Vegan Bake Off. It didn't have like a specific name, yeah.
Can people go and like taste test the food?
Yeah, so basically how it worked was I think people would pay for a ticket, and they would get a small sample of every business's dessert that participated, and all of the money for the tickets went to charity. So all the businesses donated the dessert, and the venue was donated as well. I think they raised over $1,000 for United Way in Windsor.
Wow.
So basically what happened was I brought cookies and cream donuts, and I had them cut up into I think it was like 6 pieces per donut, so it was a pretty decent size sample. And I remember I competed against a number of the well-known bakeries in Windsor. There was like Sweet Revenge, Sugar Spoon, Nooch, a couple other places, a couple smaller dessert makers as well, Healthy Mama, Carrots and Dates, and somehow my business that was open for less than a year was voted as the best vegan dessert in Windsor, against all these places that had been open for like 5+ years and had this huge following. So I was pretty floored by that. I was very honored. Especially since all of the places that I was competing against have been places that I'm a huge fan of and that I've been going to for years as a customer.
That's amazing.
So that was a huge honor, and I really felt quite accomplished. And it was an incredible experience.
Was this the original Oreo? Because exactly. So that was the original organic Oreos that we used to purchase. But thankfully, now that we've figured out how to make them ourselves, I think it's even better, and then we've gotten some really good feedback from it. So, unfortunately, the organic Oreos we used at the beginning were discontinued, and it's very important to us to use organic and fair trade wherever possible. So all of the sugar that we use is fair trade. So it means that the workers abroad who picked the sugar cane or were part of the process of harvesting it in any way, that they were all paid a fair living wage. All of our chocolate's fair trade as well, our coconut, anything that is one of the kind of the big ingredients that people are typically exploited for abroad that we use is fair trade. And then over 95% of our ingredients are organic as well. That's awesome. Where does the 5% come in? Like, are there certain things that are hard to source organically?
Yeah, there are certain things that are just kind of hard to source organically. But for the most part, everything that we use is organic. And also, there are certain things that just aren't possible to get organic, like salt. Salt is not. You can't get organic salt because it's a mineral, so it's not like, you know what I mean. It's not like grown in the ground.
I think that's amazing though, because just being vegan, like over the years, I've started to think of like, although like Oreos or other things are vegan, but what about like the actual ingredients in them might be vegan, but even just things like the cocoa bean or sugar cane, like workers are definitely exploited in the supply chains of all these different items, and it's just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's always been super important to me from the beginning, because I never wanted to be one of those businesses that was only caring about the animals, but not caring about the human beings and the environment as well. Because obviously both of us being vegan, we're really passionate about animal rights. And of course that's very important to me, and that's why I'm vegan, and that's why my business is vegan. But I wanted to also make sure that the human beings that were part of the harvesting of the food that I use are treated fairly, with respect, are given, a fair and living wage. I wanted to make sure that no pesticides are going into the environment based on the ingredients that I use. So all of that is very carefully chosen, and I do think that that's another factor in the success of Plant Joy, is just connecting with like-minded people who are passionate about these things as well, and that want to have the ability to support a company that aligns with their ethics and their values. And for some products, it is more difficult to get them organic, and the cost is much higher. It's just it's much easier to just be able to go to the grocery store down the street and pick up what you need in a non-organic bulk bag, but you have to source the ingredients in the way that we do. We buy 50-pound bags of sugar, and we have to special order them. And yes, the cost is much higher for any organic ingredient than non-organic. So that's something that every business has to take into account, that your end product is going to have to cost more for you to be able to cover those expenses. And for some businesses, that's just not something that they're willing or able to take on.
It's probably a lot of work. But it's really good that you are incorporating this into your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, it's always just been important to me to continue to live according to my values, and to continue to reevaluate for myself. Like, okay, is this the direction that I want to go in? Is there a better way of doing this? How can I learn from my mistakes? How can I pivot in a way that allows me to live more in alignment with my personal values?
Moving forward, where do you see Plant Joy going in the next couple years?
It's hard to say sometimes when I think about, my 5-year plan or my 10-year plan, because in so many ways, I didn't even have plan going into starting my business. I just thought, I'm going to try this out and see what happens, and it just continued to grow and surpass my expectations. So it's I feel like I've already reached so many milestones in my business, and having a storefront a year after starting my business was just I was very surprised to have found a place that worked, and that had everything that I needed, even though it's small. It's in a great neighborhood, and I think so many of the joys and successes that have come out of my business have surprised me. So it's hard to say where I want to be or where I'm going to be in the next 5 years. I mean, I'd love to continue connecting with people, and providing something that makes people happy, and that brings some joy to their lives, and in whatever way that I'm able to do that, whether it's potentially finding a bigger storefront, maybe maybe in the next couple of years. That's definitely a possibility. It's something that I've considered, especially since our storefront is so small. But because of COVID and everything, we have scaled back a little bit. So I don't necessarily see that happening anytime particularly soon. But it is a possibility and something that I've thought of. And but yeah, I would love to just be able to continue to impact people's lives in a positive way. And and however I'm able to do that.
Well, I mean, I think for sure you've been like impacting a lot of people in Windsor, like all of your customers. After I learned about Plant Joy, all my good memories have been associated with like going to Plant Joy that day. It's been really fun.
So sweet, and that's nice to hear. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I love being part of people's lives, even if it's in a small way, even if they're just picking up donuts. But often, you know, they're picking up donuts as a celebration, or sometimes maybe it's at the end of a day that didn't go so well for them, so it's like a little pick-me-up. So we've been able to connect with so many customers, and I've been able to connect with so many other business owners. It's just been like a joy for me to get to know my community and to be able to do what I can to impact people.
For sure. So if somebody was in your place, like before you had opened Plant Joy, what advice would you give them?
That is a great question. And, of course, hindsight is 2020. I can always look back and say, oh, maybe I would have done this differently, or maybe I would have done that differently. What I can say is that, first of all, I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had, because they've led me to where I am now. And so I don't necessarily have real regrets, but there are some things that I definitely would have done differently or been more aware of. I think part of owning a business that's really challenging is that you have to learn to grow your business at a sustainable pace, because it can be really exciting if things are picking up and you want to try to serve as many people as possible. But it's really important to have balance in your life and to learn how to take care of yourself. So that's something that I definitely would give advice on, is to make sure that that with all the energy that you're pouring into your business, that you're also pouring some back into yourself as well. Because ultimately you can't function and be the best person that you can be if you're burnt out and miserable from overworking yourself. You have to be able to, fill up your own cup, or, the saying, put on your own oxygen mask or helping somebody else. So
that's very true. So for our listeners, where can they connect with you online?
So they can connect with us on Instagram at PlantJoyYQG, and on Facebook as well. We also have a website, and right now the way that we're operating kind of our donut pre-orders is that everyone on the mailing list gets an email first letting them know when donut availability is, and then they can go on our website and purchase for the upcoming weekend. So that's just how we're doing it for now due to COVID. It's very possible that will change, just kind of depending on what we kind of feel is best to be able to provide for as many people as we possibly can. But so that's how people can connect with us right now.
Okay, cool. Can our listeners expect any like sweet treats, any hints on new flavors coming up? Or should we keep it like top secret?
So, somebody posted about s'mores one of my friends posted about s'mores on the Vegans of Windsor Facebook group. And I said great minds think alike, because she said something about vegan s'mores. There's a company that we can order vegan marshmallows from. Nice. So we're going to do that, because that is something that I feel would take a lot of time and effort to perfect, is vegan marshmallow. Right. And in some cases, if somebody's already done a really good job of it and it's something that you are able to purchase in bulk as a topping, then I say great. I would say for the most part that we do create all of the toppings for our donuts. All of the frostings are made in-house by hand. We whip all of them in our mixer. We make almost all of the crumble toppings that are on top of the donuts, like the cookies and cream cookies. Even when we have toasted coconut on top of donuts, we toast the coconut in our oven ourselves. So we do put a lot of effort into the toppings, but yes, the vegan marshmallows are something that we're able to get in bulk from a vegan company, so that's what we're going to do. and all I need to get is a culinary torch.
Like, so you can torch
Yes,
the top.
exactly.
Oh, that's so exciting.
I'm planning for that to be an August specialty flavor. So that's something that I'm very excited about.
Oh, awesome. Also, are you thinking of bringing cookie dough back?
I think cookie dough will come back at some point, but there are just so many exciting flavors that I want to cycle through first that I haven't tried before. And definitely I've already checked one off my list, which was banana cream pie.
Yes.
So I'm very happy about that. It was very well received, and I think it's delicious. You know, I think one thing that I try to remind people of, and you know that I try to remind myself of every day too, is to do what you can to plant joy in someone else's life. That's why that's why I named the business Plant Joy, is because it's kind of a play on words, right? It's plant-based joy. It's a plant-based treat, but it's also the idea of being able to plant joy in someone else's life and plant a seed of joyfulness. So that's something that I try to reiterate, to others and to myself, is just to live your life in a way that brings joy to others.
That's a very good message, spreading all that positivity and good vibes. Yeah. So what are your hours for people who don't know?
So right now, it's a little bit different because of COVID. So right now we don't actually technically have opening hours because we're not allowing people to walk in. Basically the way it works is that people can order in advance online, and then they just pick them up during a specific time slot. And we're doing curbside pickup.
Okay, cool. So yeah, guys, if you want to order donuts, go follow Plant Joy on Instagram. She puts it up on her story whenever they're available. And you can pre-order them and pick them up on a specified day.
But thank you so much for talking with us today. I really enjoyed this. I was looking forward to this the entire week.
Thank you so much. Thanks for asking me to come on the podcast, and I'm really honored to be a guest. So I'm just grateful to be part of it.
Thank you. All right. Take care, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me, Neha. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time.